Riddle's kind of fascinating. Hopefully I got them right. The first one, the cylinder. My suspicion is that there is an offset moving mass inside the cylinder. Liquid, semi-solid, motorized, something. When the mass is on the right or centered, it's going to allow the whole thing to move downhill, but then that mass is now moving uphill, up vertically relative to the rolling downhill, and at some point that's going to balance, and it might stop the mass from rolling downhill. Because if you were to, for example, put a wheel on the ground and put a mass here, that's going to create a moment force down, which is going to cause this to want to go this way. But once that mass reaches the bottom, it'll stop. Well, the same thing should happen on a hill. Let me pause a second. So if you're on a hill and you have a mass down here, when that it rolls down the hill, that mass is now gaining potential energy. It's moving up, and at some point that's going to balance the inclined plane. Now, that would stop it from moving at all. So this mass must be moving. So either a liquid going through baffles, a semi-solid like oobleck or syrup, or a friction solid mass or a motor, something in there. You have a movable offset mass inside the cylinder. Number two, it depends. There's a lot of factors here. The bike shouldn't go backwards. It depends on if the force required to rotate the crank, rotate the gear drive, rotate the gears, rotate the tire is greater than the force you're applying to it and the friction on the ground. So in theory, the bike should try to move forward until a straight line is formed between your hand and the pedal arm. So right now you have a bend. Here's your pedal arm and here's your string, and when you pull it, these are eventually going to straighten out. When they get straightened out, the bike will stop moving forward. Now there's no more forward motion, and the bike should pull backwards. Or if your hand is higher than the center point of the crank, that's over here, if your hand is higher than the center point of the crank, it might actually lift the bike off the ground, again, depending on the forces, the gearing, the mass, the friction, etc. But either which way, the bike should go forward and then stop once the pedal, crankshaft, pivot point, pedal, and string form a straight line, at which point it'll stop moving forward, because now you have a straight line pulling back. 3 is 300%. You basically are always dividing by 2 because you're doing 2 laps. So take your final speed, double it, divide that by 2. Solve for X. What do you need to divide by 2 to equal double your first speed? It'll always be 300%. If you're going 1 mile an hour, you need to run at 3 miles an hour on your second lap. 3 plus 1 is 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 2 is double 1. If you're going at 4 miles an hour, then you need to run 16 miles an hour on your second lap, because 12 miles an hour, because 12 plus 4 is 16. 16 divided by 2 is 8. 8 is double 4. So it's 300% of whatever your first lap speed is. So run really slow on your first lap. Because if you get past like 3 miles an hour, you better be an athlete. The train was a confusing one. I don't know how the gearing works on a train. My gut wants to say that no part of the train moves backwards, because even the part that I suspect is the answer should be stationary when the train's moving forward relative to the ground. But I was thinking like a tank tread. The connecting rod on the drive wheels of a train is a gear ratio. So as long as that gear ratio is bigger than 1 to 1, and I assume it is, then the connecting rod, when it does its thing where it's doing this, as it's moving that back wheel, well then each time it's on the upstroke of the back wheel, that connecting rod has to come forward to finish that stroke. And if the gear ratio is right, when it's going forward and then going backwards, it'll actually be moving backwards faster than the train's moving forward. So that depends on the gear ratio, but that's the only component on a train that I can think of that'll do that, is the connecting, I don't know what it's called. It looks like a connecting rod in a piston engine, which is basically what the wheel is. It's a rotating wheel. It's got a connecting rod. It works just like an engine piston. And matter of fact, it is an engine piston. I believe the drive wheel would be the crankshaft equivalent, connecting rod, and then the piston is actually in the steam engine doing its back and forth, driving that wheel. So I want to say connecting rod of the drain. Hopefully I got them right.